All right, some new details here to share with you in the controversial arrest of two black men at a Philadelphia Starbucks. Police have just released the 911 call that sparked the whole incident. Take a listen.
Hi, I have two gentlemen at my cafe that are refusing to make a purchase or leave. I'm at the Starbucks at 18th and Spruce.
All right, please, I'll be on as soon as possible.
Thank you.
The two men were later arrested. You've probably now seen the video of them being led out in handcuffs. It went viral. Starbucks CEO called the arrest reprehensible and just today ordered that on May 29th, every single one of its 175,000 employees will undergo racial bias training. The company is going to close all 8,000 of its company-owned stores in order to make sure that employees have no distractions. We also learned that Starbucks CEO has met with the two men who were arrested, and that the three men have spoke multiple times since the incident.
For the past several days, Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson and my clients, the gentlemen involved in the incident at Starbucks that led to their arrest, have been engaged in constructive discussions about this issue, as well as what's happening in communities across the country. Mr. Johnson apologized on behalf of Starbucks, and the conversation continues today about how this painful incident can become a vehicle for positive social change.
Erin Thomas joins me. She is a partner at Paradigm, a consulting group that actually helps companies develop strategies around diversity and inclusion. Erin, thank you so much for joining me. Implicit bias. People have been talking about how this is a perfect example of that here in our country. How do you train people to recognize it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Michaela. You know, at Paradigm, at least, we really train people by doing two things. One, raising awareness about what bias is, while also not letting them off the hook for sort of having bias. And most importantly, making sure that they're equipped with tactical behavioral strategies for disrupting bias so that it's not showing up like we saw in this tape from Starbucks.
I think a lot of people are pointing to some sensitivity training, some diversity training, some inclusion practices. But then I suppose many of us probably wonder, can you train bias away?
Yeah, it's a great question. You can't train bias away. You know, bias is an adaptive, sort of cognitive, mental strategy that enables us to navigate the worlds that we live in, full of information. But what you can do is stop it in its tracks. So I think hopefully Starbucks is going to take that step to make sure that their employees are making sure that they're doing what they can. I want to also add, though, that clearly this incident raises a greater level of vigilance around what are those policies and practices that Starbucks has in place. This is not just something that a quick training can fix. There is some infrastructure that needs to be set up so that there's not a gateway for these bias to manifest. There shouldn't be discretion on behalf of individual stores or individual employees to behave how they see fit.
And let's be honest, it's not just Starbucks. I mean, this kind of thing is happening in businesses, small and large, across the nation. I want to be frank with you. You and I, we work for companies. We have to go through the standard HR training, whether it's about ethics in our world, whether it's about inclusion or diversity, whatever. Sexual harassment in the workplace is a famous one that we all have to sit through. How productive are these? We've asked this before, but I think in this situation, it's worth looking at. Do these kind of training videos and seminars and offsites, do they tend to work?
So they can work for very clear, crisp goals. They cannot solve greater cultural issues within any company or organization. Our training is good, but it's not that good. So it's really important that companies get really specific about what they're trying to do with a training. So in the case of Starbucks, if they're trying to kickstart conversations around what greater policies should we be putting in place, great. If they're trying to solve this PR nightmare with a half-day workshop, it's not going to happen. But we've shown that with our training, we're able to change behaviors for up to 6 months after folks go through it. But those behaviors are really specific. And certainly if you don't have a greater culture of awareness and of clear tactical strategies that your employees use when they're working with each other and interfacing with clients and customers, a training's not going to solve for that, no.
Well, let's be honest, Darren, you and I both probably would agree that society as a whole has a larger issue. This is a societal problem that we have here, and we need to take a good time out to do some soul searching, to be sure. Aaron Thomas, really appreciate you joining me there from Chicago.
Thank you.
Anger is spreading in Philadelphia and across the country over an incident at a Starbucks last Thursday. A manager calling police asking that 2 black men be removed from the store for trespassing. The men had asked to use the restroom but were told it was for customers only. Then they sat at a table waiting for a friend to arrive but didn't make a purchase. The scene caught on camera by other customers.
What did they get called for? Because there are 2 black guys sitting here meeting me? Yes, well, what did they do? What did they do? Did someone tell me what they did?
They didn't do anything. I saw the entire thing.
They didn't.
What did they do?
And the woman said it's for...
The 2 men arrested and handcuffed. They weren't charged and eventually were released. Joining me now is Melissa DePino, an eyewitness. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. You were in that Starbucks when these men were arrested?
I was in the Starbucks.
And tweeted out this video. So tell us what you saw leading up to this video.
Well, you know, I really just noticed something was happening when I saw 2 police officers come into the Starbucks and go over and talk to the men, and then a couple more officers came in, and then a couple more, and I think there were 6 or 8 of them. And sometime during that time, their friend, who you can see in the video, showed up. That's who they were meeting. And we were all just wondering, you know, why are all these policemen here? Why are they trying to make these men leave? They were just sitting there like everyone else. And, you know, we all sort of standing up and, you know, sort of talking to the people behind the counter and to the police officers and asking what was happening. And then they put them in handcuffs and took them out.
And they were, when the police arrived, I mean, how did the other customers react? Because they weren't, there was no yelling, nothing, right? They were pretty calm.
There was no yelling, there was no aggression. I mean, people, they were sitting there like anybody else would be sitting in a Starbucks at any time. And when the police officers were talking to them, there were no raised voices. I was sitting really close by, and you know, I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying because they were talking in a regular tone. So no, there was no disturbance.
So what did the other customers do? How they react?
Well, most of the other customers got up and started saying, what's, just like the man you see on the video, their friend, I mean, what's going on? Why are they asked to leave? You know, there was another woman who said, oh, I'm sitting here with my Gatorade and I've been here for 2 hours and nobody says anything to me. You know, I mentioned that I had been there in that store the day before, and I sat there for an hour. I didn't order anything. I was waiting for my son, and then I left.
You say, you've been saying that this doesn't happen to white people. That's what you say.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can go wherever I want, do whatever I want. This would never happen to me. And, you know, the thing that I've been saying is that, you know, I know that this happens every day to black and brown people in this country, and we just don't hear about it. We don't see it. I mean, it's out there, but people don't see it. They don't hear it. They don't believe it. And having this tweet go viral, over 10 million views, you know, I'm glad it's out there, and that however it got out there, I'm glad it's out there, and I'm glad it's sort of sparking conversation so that people who experience this can be the ones to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And maybe something will happen unless it do more than talk, right? Some action to make a difference. Well, we hope that it makes a difference, and we thank you for joining us, Melissa.
Thanks so much, Don. I appreciate it.
So I'm going to bring in now CNN law enforcement analyst Charles Ramsey, a former Philadelphia commissioner, police commissioner, and CNN political contributor Michael Nutter, the former mayor of Philadelphia. Well, we've assembled the right people to talk about this. Good evening to both of you, gentlemen. You know, as a former mayor of Philadelphia, how do you feel about this incident happening in your city?
Well, first, Don, let me say now as a private citizen that I'd certainly like to apologize to these two gentlemen. What happened to them is certainly unacceptable. It's a horrible situation, poorly handled by the manager at Starbucks. I have no idea what was going on in that person's mind, but this is not the Philadelphia that I know and love and have served most of my adult life. We will not be defined by this kind of unacceptable incident and behavior. And the company will now deal with the two gentlemen. But I just wanted to say that as a private citizen, it is, for me, look, in office, out of office, I love this city, and for us to be, national, international news for something so, ignorant, it really does break my heart. And we have to be able to move forward from this. Because we are the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, I believe we will. But we cannot ignore, as the previous person indicated, that these situations occur, whether in Philadelphia or anywhere else in the country, and cannot be glossed over. From what I can see and hear, Starbucks is not doing that. This may be the first time in history that the CEO of a major company came to a particular city literally to apologize to these two individuals. I don't think that happened in the United Airlines situation.
It's the last thing they need,
hats
Mayor.
off to Kevin Johnson.
Yeah, it's the last thing they need, and they certainly don't need a boycott. And Charles, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Richard Ross said that his officers did nothing wrong. He also said that he wished this hadn't happened. He says, this is a quote, "As an African-American male, I am very aware of implicit bias." Did the officers do the right thing in this incident, you think, Commissioner?
Well, I think the officers did the right thing because they responded to a 911 call that was placed by the manager of Starbucks. So I don't think the problem is with the officers. I think the problem is with the manager at Starbucks. Why did she call to begin with?
But don't the officers have discretion when they get to the scene if they ask you what you're doing and they can't really explain and they say, "I'm sitting here and I don't understand"? Don't they have the discretion, Commissioner, to not arrest these people for doing what most people do in a Starbucks, to go and grab some power at a plug, wait for a friend, use the bathroom, or use some Wi-Fi?
Well, the officers do have discretion. There's no question about that at all. But my understanding, and again, I wasn't there, but my understanding, having spoken with the commissioner after this occurred, is that the manager insisted that they be escorted out, that they weren't buying anything. That's against their policy. We've had problems before with Starbucks with a uniformed police sergeant in Philadelphia that was refused entry to the bathroom because they weren't buying coffee. And they were on duty working at the time, and this happened to be a white sergeant. So I think Starbucks has to really think about their policies. When is it appropriate to call the police? We're not private bodyguards or bouncers. I mean, if a person commits a crime, that's one thing. If they don't, then they should deal with it some other way. But my understanding is that the manager did want them not only escorted out, but was willing to sign complaints.
Yeah. Mayor, you want to weigh in on the officer discretion?
Just that, I mean, as you pointed out, Don, yes. Certainly there is some discretion that the officers can exercise, and as the commissioner said, it appears that slightly between a rock and a hard place. But I mean, I will say, every person who is stopped, if you run a light, yellow light, red light, or something like that, I mean, every person does not receive a ticket, but there's often some discussion or something like that. I just think that they ended up in a really bad situation, and sometimes whether it's a supervisor or different officers, possibly making a different judgment call in that regard. But again, back to the manager, if you call the police, I mean, something is going to happen. You call the fire department, you can't complain that your carpet got wet. Why did you call in the first place?
Right.
Why didn't you try to talk it out?
That's what the commissioner is saying.
With the gentleman. They said they're waiting for somebody, then wait and see if they're waiting for somebody.
That's what the commissioner is saying.
They were not disturbing the peace. They were not bothering anybody. They were not raising their voices. They're sitting at tables, and the place wasn't even that crowded. So, I mean, again, from what we hear from management, they're trying to deal with their policies, try to help their employees better understand how to deal with these situations. And as the commissioner said, when should you call the police?
Yeah, I want to get Charles Ramsey in. Just one more question before we run out of time here. The mayor's office of black male engagement said the best thing the men did was to cooperate and not get hostile. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with it. But from what I heard from your previous guest, the officers didn't raise their voice. The two gentlemen didn't raise their voices. They discussed it in a rational, reasonable way. And so that wasn't an issue at all. The issue was really, why were the police called to begin with? But they certainly handled themselves properly, because the thing could have escalated had they not done that.
Mayor, Commissioner, pleasure to have you both on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The sad truth is, what happened in that Starbucks could happen any place in this country. Millions of people of color could tell similar stories. One of them is CNN's Kamal Bell. I'm going to talk to him right after this. The arrest of two black men at a Starbucks is sadly not at all surprising to a lot of African Americans. So many of us have these stories, just like this one. Black and brown Americans. I want to talk about this with Kamal Bell, host of CNN's United Shades of America. Kamal, how you doing?
Hello, sir. How you doing?
Yeah. You know I got Emmys too now.
Yeah, I've heard about
I'm talking about our promo, but let's get out of the business here. You heard the interview with the mayor and the commissioner. This Starbucks incident is very similar to your own experience, 2015. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I think we have to stop pretending this is about one Starbucks or one coffee shop. These things happen in coffee shops and businesses every day where black people get kicked out or get asked to leave or don't get to do things white people are allowed to do. In 2015, on my birthday, actually, I was told to leave the Elmwood Cafe in Berkeley, California, because they thought I was harassing my wife and my 13-week-old baby. So,
wow.
and so, yeah, exactly, which, you know, because I had talked to my wife for about a minute. I had met her and her friends at this coffee shop, and they told me to leave because somebody had complained about me being there. And the thing that I realized, and I think about this with these two black men at this Starbucks, is that I was afraid they would call the cops. I actually thought, like, oh,
no one
what
called
if
the
they call
cops on you, right? No one called the cops, and no one mistakenly thought that you had a gun. But at the time, did you worry about those things?
I did worry about those things because we were in 2015, we were in the middle of Ferguson being in all the headlines, and so I know that that was a possibility. But here's the thing that's so sickening about it, Don. The reason why I don't think the cops were called is because my wife was right there, who's white, and she was able to go, "That's my husband. We're together. I'm his wife." And I think that probably her white skin actually probably took some of the heat out of the situation, which is sad but true.
After that happened, Kamal, your wife, the owner of the cafe, along with activists, had a community forum on racism at a school in Berkeley. How'd that go?
Well, I just found out that he blocked me on Facebook. The Elmwood Cafe has blocked me on Facebook because I have complained that over the more than 3 years since it happened, they said they were going to do a bunch of things, a bunch of community initiatives. They were going to teach people about implicit bias in the neighborhood, in the city. They've done none of it. And they had a website up until today that I said it's just a white square with yellow around it. They had done nothing about it. And now their solution is to block me on Facebook. And that's what I think we have to talk about with Starbucks. Starbucks is a much bigger company than the Elmwood Cafe. But if we don't keep the pressure on, they're just going to wait for the heat to die down and they'll go back to business as usual. And we can't afford that. And this is not just about coffee shops and these black men. The only reason we know about this is because there was a white woman there who tweeted it out. This is about how black people are treated in this country. This issue is linked to the black teenage boy who was shot at when he was asking for directions. These are all the same thing, Don.
Well, it's interesting because it happened in Philadelphia, right? A city that has a big minority population, a big black population. I used to live in Philadelphia, and people are surprised when I would tell them when I lived there that these racist incidents happen. You think maybe it just happens in the South. And you live in Berkeley, though. I mean, that's a liberal, you don't get more liberal, a liberal bastion. It happens everywhere.
Oh, please, I hope we get more liberal than Berkeley. Please, Lord. Please, Black Jesus. Because don't believe the alt-right hype. Berkeley is not as liberal as they want you to believe it is. And the thing I want to say about that is that, because I just did hear the police commissioner talking in the previous segment, they're acting like that this situation was successful because the black men didn't get mad and the cops didn't get mad. Those black men were in prison were held in custody for almost 9 hours. They got out at like 1:30 in the morning. How is that a successful situation? If they had if they had led them out of the Starbucks and let them to go on their way with their friend, maybe that's successful. But they actually took them into custody for 9 hours. That can't be success. That these
and they have records now. And I was talking to the mayor and the commissioner after the segment just aired in the commercial break, and they said, well, now they have to get their records expunged. That's a long process. It's very expensive. So they're in the system now, even though because they were processed, even though they let them go.
Yeah, you can't wipe out the memory of being in jail for 9 hours. You can't wipe out the memory of having to get your record expunged. You can't also wipe out the memory of that video going everywhere that they will be forever known as those two black men in that video.
So what do we do, Kamal?
This is the thing. We can't talk about it like it's a Starbucks issue. This is an America issue. Until America, and specifically American white people, are ready to confront and participate in America's history and legacy of racism and current day of racism, like the white woman in the video did, who took the video, we're still going to be here, Don. We'll be here in a year talking about another coffee shop or something else.
But you know that when we talk about this, right, we're race baiters instead of informing people from our own experience that happens. Oh, I'm so sick of that. You're race baiters. And listen, every time I have like a group of African Americans on, if there are no people who are not of color, I get the thing, what is this, BET? Why don't you have some diversity? I'm like, do you watch cable news all day? I mean, this is like, you know, you should be applauding me for having these African Americans on TV. Go on.
Yeah, a lot of what goes on in the news media is, white guy, what do you think? I don't know, white guy, what do you think? I think this white guy. And so whenever we hear from the voices of people who aren't older white men, we start to think something weird is happening. And I think, again, white people, as Pastor Michael McBride from a church in Berkeley said, white people need to understand that racism is hurting them too. Not the same way it's hurting people of color, but it's actually affecting your life in a negative way. The way the woman in the video understood it and the way that my wife understands it.
Yeah, diversity of opinion is one thing, but we also need diversity in ethnicity as well. Representation, and not just, we have to stop having just conversations. We need to do something about it.
We need to do something. This is not something, we can't act like like Starbucks has to fix this. America has to fix it.
Well, you're working on that. In the new season of Kamau Bell's United Shades of America, it premieres on Sunday night, April 29th at 10 p.m. He tackles these issues. Thank you, Kamau. Appreciate
Thank you very
that.
much, Don.